is Indian Country Today.
Eskuli Umayasa. I'm Patty Tolhongba. Thank you for joining us. This is Indian Country Today's newscast about the coronavirus pandemic and how it's impacting Indian Country. As of last night, the count across Indian Country, we have 539 cases with 24 deaths in the Indian health system. If you go to the indiancountrytoday.com platform, you're going to see our COVID-19 syllabus, and that syllabus keeps track of all of these numbers, and we're updating that daily. So I encourage you to go there and watch the story output and also the information on the latest cases impacting Indian Country. This weekend, the Navajo Nation is going to have probably the strictest curfew stay-at-home order in place. The Navajo Nation president has issued an order saying that from 8 o'clock Friday night until 5 a.m. Monday morning, no one is allowed out unless you're an essential worker or if you're going to get groceries. But even then, they will stop and ask questions. And the reason for that is that 4 weeks ago, Navajo had one case of the coronavirus on its reservation, and they have the largest land base of any tribe in the United States. Today, 4 weeks later, that number has increased to 384 cases. And so they're really trying to instill that idea of staying home to flatten the curve and to prevent the virus from spreading. In upstate New York, the Seneca Nation president blasted New York Governor Andrew Cuomo for his executive order that takes vital resources and medical equipment from upstate New York to downstate New York. And the Seneca president quoted here, he said, "The governor is signaling his willingness to sacrifice the lives and safety of our family and neighbors. He is creating a dangerous us versus them dynamic, and he's making his choice crystal clear." And that's a quote from Seneca Nation President Ricky Armstrong Sr. So a lot of impact across Indian Country, how are tribes handling it in different parts of the country? That's our question today. And we would like to welcome our guest today, Valerie Davidson. And Valerie Davidson is the former lieutenant governor of the great state of Alaska, and she is the incoming president of Alaska Pacific University. Welcome to our program, Valerie.
Oyana, Patty, thank you for the welcome. I should let folks know that since I'm here in Alaska, we do have some lag with the video and audio. So I think we would all agree that I'm not going to win a lip sync contest, but hopefully it still works.
Yes, well, we really appreciate you being here. And despite any technical difficulties, we're going to go forward with our conversation because, Alaska has a really horrible history with pandemics. And in 1918, the influenza really devastated Alaska Native communities. Can you share a little bit of information and background on that?
Sure. So as we know, Alaska is no exception. With contact came a lot of new diseases that our families simply weren't immune to. And not only the 1918 pandemic, but also hepatitis and a whole bunch of TB, all kinds of things. But if you can see in this photo right behind me, in this black and white photo, those are my maternal grandparents, and they had 9 children and only 4 of them lived. So 5 of their children died. And the 4 who lived were really, really good hand washers. And so, so they passed that on to their children. Many of them worked at the old hospital in Bethel and were public health employees as well. So unfortunately, in many of our communities, half of our population was decimated, and that kind of so when folks are asking, why are you taking this seriously? For many people in Alaska and tribes across the country, this is in our family's time, in my mother's generation, and in our lifetime. And so people just need to take extra precautions and extra measures to stay safe.
Is there, and some of our reporting has covered this, but a lot of the villages are so remote, you can only get in there either by airplane or by a boat. Does that protect them?
Well, yes and no. It depends on whether anyone gets in, just like everywhere else. So one of the things that has happened is that because much of our care in Alaska is delivered by community health aides and community health practitioners, they have already been trained through distance delivery, distance learning on how to address COVID-19. Working through the statewide health system, the Alaska Tribal Health System, Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium is now starting to deploy testing machines out to the regions, which will really help to be able to get better information about where these issues are happening. What I'm telling my family is we should assume that it's everywhere, and we should each act like we are a carrier, even if we are feeling well. And our job is to protect those around us that we love and care for.
That message is just really resonates when you think about how you can protect yourself by not going out, not bringing everybody to the grocery store or on these trips that would typically be a family outing, and then to get home and to wipe down everything before you put them away. I've seen some of your videos that you've had encouraging people to social distance. What prompted that?
So in my, well, one, our family history, and when there's public health messaging, we take it very seriously as a family because we've lived through this before. And we also have some family members who are high risk. My mother is 76 and she lives with us and we love her and we want to keep her safe. And so we all take that very seriously. Everything we have, all of who we are in our life today, we owe to our elders. And she is one of them. And we honor her by taking extra measures to stay safe. My youngest daughter also has asthma. And so she is also high risk. And so we have had the two of them in our family on lockdown for about almost a month now. And when my older daughter came home from college, the first thing that my mom said to her was, "Welcome to our lockdown." So, we sort of joke about it, but we're actually very serious. And you know, if you think about it, we all in Alaska go to camp. We go to fish camp, we go to spring camp or sealing camp or whatever kind of camp that we go to. And when we're at camp, we do with what we have. We use what's in our home or in our camp, and that's enough. We make do. And I would just encourage everybody across Indian country to do the same thing. Take special care and ask yourself, and I ask this too, do I really need what I'm about to go to the store for? Is it worth basically endangering the lives of my mother and my daughter? And the answer is most often no. Is this really an emergency? Is this something I really need, or is it something that's just nice to have?
So choices that you're making on a daily basis.
Yes.
Talk a little
and we can also do that in our places of work. So for example, at Alaska Pacific University, we have taken extra measures to make sure that our APU community is safe. So we are doing all classes online, except for a few that have to be in person. And for those, we are taking extra measures. Those might be clinicals. But for staff as well, faculty and staff, we're all telecommuting unless it's something that physically requires someone to be there. Security is still checking the buildings. Our dorms are empty except for students who may not have a safe place to go home to. And so we've done things like we have postponed spring graduation, which was supposed to happen on April 25. And we're looking at doing a virtual celebration at the end of the semester, but we're also inviting students to come to the physical commencement in the fall so that family can still celebrate their accomplishment.
What a time of transition for you coming in as the new president of APU, and not only just with this pandemic, but you're also in the process of turning that into a tribal college.
Yes. So APU is a tribal university, and because the majority of our board members are Alaska Native or American Indian, and we are affiliated with the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. We now have 24% of our students who are Alaska Native or American Indian. To be eligible to receive a next level of funding, we have to be 50% or more Alaska Native in terms of our student enrollment. So we are on the path to being there, but it's a really exciting partnership, and it's pretty exciting for Alaska to have another tribal university. We have a partnership with Ilisagvik College in Utqiagvik, formerly known as Barrow. And it's an incredible partnership that has really benefited Alaska students and employers alike.
Well, that's a wonderful transition. Speaking of partnerships, Indian Country Today also is in partnership with Alaska Pacific University, and our bureau is based there on campus. So thank you for that too. Yes.
Thank you.
Now let's talk about how the Alaska Native Health Consortium, how is it structured to set up? How is it set up to help Alaska Natives in this pandemic crisis compared to, say, an IHS facility?
So the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium is managed by tribes, and so it's no longer IHS direct service. It's managed under the Alaska Tribal Health Compact. Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium is one of the signatories to the compact. One of the things that makes Alaska unique is that all Alaska tribes and tribal organizations have negotiated a single compact with the federal government. And so tribes have a long history in Alaska of working together, referring patients to each other, to the Alaska Native Medical Center, which is jointly managed and operated by both the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium and South Central Foundation, but a long history of working together. And which is really impressive when you consider that 229 federally recognized tribes are able to work together and negotiate a common compact. And these are definitely, we're no different than tribes everywhere that sometimes in our past, we have not always gotten along so well and have sometimes gone to war in our past history. But it's really an incredible thing that tribes are able to work together.
I think that's something that a lot of people may not realize, that there are so many tribes in Alaska, as you mentioned, 229. So yes, that's bringing 229 different groups in any situation is quite a feat. When we look at Alaska and all the unique challenges this pandemic is throwing at those communities, what is your biggest concern?
Well, I think that tribes have done a really nice job of limiting access to their communities, which I think is definitely critically important. And, you know, one of the things that my grandmother taught me is that when you lead with love, you never stand alone. And one thing I have learned over the years is sometimes that love means tough love. And this is one of those times. And tribes are really being aggressive in controlling who comes to their community. And that's going to be really critical. I know in the past, I think it was maybe Shishmaref during the 1918 pandemic, they actually had folks outside of their community who, if people were stopping, they actually prevented them from coming into the community, and that saved their village. And so today we're really looking at the same kind of thing. So one of the things though that is really helpful is that in Alaska, the approximately 200 villages, and our average village size is about 300 to 350 people. Every community has access to a community health aide or a community health practitioner, and that person knows everyone in the village. And while sometimes it can be challenging when everybody knows your comings and goings in a time of pandemic, it's actually really helpful.
Yeah, that is the biggest challenge, I think, just being not worried about a stigma, the idea that somebody has the virus, but how do you help them and how do you help the family? And so many of our families live multi-generational, in one home. And so it's that ripple effect of how, if you bring that virus in, how does it impact the family? And how do you not put fear into the people who are carrying the virus, who have been tested positive?
Yes. So the other is that we've talked to folks about is that, we've been asked by people, well, what happens if you live in a community that doesn't have running water? How do you protect your family? How do you sanitize? And there's actually a really great document available on the Yukon-Kuskokwim Health Corporation's website. Their website is ykhc.org. And it's how you can disinfect without running water. And so in Alaska, where we have, about 25% of our homes in rural Alaska don't have running water. We're used to doing things like packing water, melting snow, packing ice, melting it and boiling it to do basic household functions. And unfortunately, the pace of funding, the level of funding has not kept up with the level of need. And so we're very concerned. And imagine how heartbreaking it would be to be in a time of pandemic as we are now. And what you hear on the news and on public service announcements all the time is wash your hands, constantly wash your hands. And to live in a home that has no running water would be absolutely terrifying. And so it's really important that we do get increased funding so that we can bring those basic level of service of running water and adequate sanitation facilities to our homes, not only in Alaska, but all across the country.
That brings up a very good point about the lack of running water. So we will look into that website. Thank you for sharing that with us. What is the biggest message you want to send out to Alaska Native people, but all of Indian country in fighting this pandemic?
Stay home. So I think that, and it's more than just, people are calling it social distancing, and we're trying to get folks to maybe think about it as physical distancing, because you can still be social like we're doing on this call right now. We're still engaging, we're social, but we're doing it at a physical distance. And think about the ways that you can maintain touch with family and community. Call them, check on elders, call them, FaceTime them. I've seen people doing community beading, songs, all kinds of incredible things, which is really wonderful to have with social media. But don't do social media that inspires you to leave the house. That's not a good thing. And so as much as you can, stay home, stay put, listen to what your local health provider is telling you in terms of advice that they're giving. That's really, really important, because your local clinic, your local providers really know what's happening in your community. And the truth is, none of us are exempt from this coronavirus. None of us are exempt from COVID-19. We just had our first case, first positive test come back in Bethel yesterday. So in my family, that's an issue on my side. My daughters, their dad is from Zia Pueblo, and they are having people test positive there. And so our family is feeling it, and our family is no different from everyone else's family. So act like you have it, act like you are a carrier, and do what you can to protect those around you. When you go out in public, wear a mask, because that protects other people. If you're coughing or if you're sneezing, those droplets can't get on other people or into the air. And so take extra measures. We need you to make this through. We need just as we are the survivors of those earlier pandemics, including the 1918 pandemic, including the TB outbreaks that happened here in Alaska and throughout the country. We're the ones who live to be able to carry our traditions forward. And we need you to set the example for young people who are watching. We need you to make sure that as many of us as possible make it so that we can continue carrying on our traditions and our culture and our language.
Valerie Davison, that's a perfect way to end our interview. Thank you so much for joining us today. And in my language, we say esquili. The women from my village say thank you in that way. And in your language, tell us how you say thank you.
Koyana or Koyana Jaknak. Thank you very much.
Now let's bring in Jocelyn Estes. She's our national correspondent based in Anchorage, Alaska. She's been covering the pandemic and how it's impacting Alaska Native villages there. Welcome, Jocelyn.
Good morning. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. We want to talk a little bit about your most recent story and the disruption of air service to some of the villages in Alaska that really rely on these airplanes bringing in supplies, but they also bring in passengers.
So Raven Air is a small airlines that has been serving for several years, serving over 100, I think they said 180 villages. And so the governor issued a mandate telling people to, he banned non-essential travel, basically. And so what happened was the traffic dropped, it just plummeted. And Raven Air it ended up declaring bankruptcy. So that left over 100 villages with no way to get passengers or freight or mail coming in because they're accessible only by air. So some other airlines have leapt into the picture, and actually something happened yesterday that was pretty amazing. The North Slope Borough commandeered some of Raven Airlines equipment, planes and ground equipment and hangars in Utqiagvik, and possibly in smaller villages on the North Slope. So some of the other airlines, Raven Air took out 72 airplanes. So the other airlines have not been able, they don't have the planes, they don't have the capacity to just jump in and take over everything that Raven Air was doing. So some of the villages are going to get air service only 3 days a week. And some of them, it hasn't been sorted out yet exactly how they're going to get passenger service.
And that's a huge impact on the villages that are, again, in these remote areas. And the other story that you wrote recently had to do with the fishing industry and how they're getting, May is when people start arriving to start preparing for the fishing season in June and July. What is the update on that?
Well, the Bristol Bay Borough is, first of all, the state of Alaska is the #1 producer of fish in terms of value and tons landed. And a big part of that is Bristol Bay out in Southwest Alaska. And you have a whole, a half dozen maybe or a dozen villages that have fish processors and fishing fleets based in their communities. So Dillingham, I think, has 2,300, a population of 2,300 people. And Naknek, which is the next biggest town in Bristol Bay to host fish processors and fishermen, is a village of 800 people. So 14,000 people descend upon Bristol Bay to engage in the fishing. And they're already starting to show up, although a local nonprofit notified fishermen and said, could you wait and not show up until May to give the communities time to organize so that they can keep COVID-19 out, because everybody knows it just spreads like wildfire once it gets somewhere. So the fish processors, the fishing organizations, the Bristol Bay Borough, the tribes, the King Salmon tribe and the Naknek tribe are all, and the tribal health system are all meeting regularly to figure out how to keep COVID-19 out when you have that many people showing up. So some of the things that they're going to do are they're going to have they're going to screen people just verbally, asking them how they feel. You know, do they have a cough or anything? They're also going to take their temperature either in Seattle or Anchorage as they come in from all over the country, and that's something else. In years past, a lot of their workers have come from Eastern Europe and Asia, and because of the travel ban that the president's put in place, that's not going to happen this year. So the workers are coming in from all over the country, and they're going to get their temperature taken, and then they'll fly out to Bristol Bay, and they'll go directly into quarantine for 14 days. And the thing is that these workers, they get paid $13 to $15 an hour. They work 7 days a week, 16 hours a day, because the fish are all coming back to spawn in their stream of origin, and they all come in pretty much, as you mentioned, in June and July. It's a period of weeks, and people are making their entire annual income in that short period. And the fish are being brought into the processors, and the workers have to get them turned around and, you know, frozen or canned. So
this is a really good example of just how the pandemic is having an immediate impact, but also having an impact in the long term, because if they decide to cancel or reduce the fishing, the number of people who can come in and fish, well, then that impacts everybody else down the road because there won't be that product on the shelves. Jacqueline, that's great. We're going to look forward to your reports and continue to talk to you on our newscast. So thank you so much for joining us. And again, you can watch and read all of our stories and the stories that we just mentioned from Jacqueline on our COVID syllabus. It has all of our stories listed on there. So that will do it for this edition of Indian Country Today. I want to thank our guest again, Valerie Davidson, who is the incoming president of Alaska Pacific University, and also Jacqueline Estes, our national correspondent in Anchorage, Alaska. Join us again tomorrow for our newscast at 4 o'clock Eastern Time. And until then, everyone take care of yourself. Your life is precious. Thank you for joining us.
This is Indian Country Today.